I was listening to some podcasts that were also on the network, and I literally just had a thought of it would be really cool to work with them. It would be really cool if my show was a part of this. 2 days later, I checked my email. Someone from the network literally emailed me saying, "Hey, we love your show. We'd love to have you be a part of this." So it wasn't just at the drop of a hat, but it was one of those moments where it was like, whoa, how did that happen? Welcome to this week's episode of She's So Lucky. My name is Les. I am your host. And a lot of what we've been talking about on the show are interviews with amazing women who have created their own luck. But today I wanted to talk about ways that us as everyday gals can also create our own luck. This is more of like a state of the union for lucky girls and our lucky girl commandments. And I do think that post rebrand, there's just some general community management and housekeeping that I need to do. So one of my big goals when I rebranded the podcast was I wanted to have a brand and community that felt a little bit more cohesive. In the previous version of the podcast, I never really had any sort of tagline or name for our community. I would use different phrases here and there. I would come on and call people balanced besties or balanced baddies every once in a while. And people bullied me out of no longer using the word girly, so I don't really say that anymore. But it never really felt cohesive. It never felt like it was something that belonged to the show. And so when I renamed the show, I thought, okay, we're going to have something kind of cute to call this community. I thought about maybe playing around with the Lucky Charms, that seemed a little cute, but also seemed like a bit of a copyright infringement. And somebody on YouTube actually made the suggestion, and I'm so sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head who it was, but if that was you, comment below or send me a DM so I can be sure to give you credit. Someone on YouTube commented that our community here should be referred to as the Clovers. And I actually thought that that was brilliant for a couple of reasons. One, we know our Gabrielle Union episode that we had a few months ago really went up and was a huge moment for this show. So shout out to Gab. Shout out to the movie Bring It On. Shout out to the East Compton Clovers and all that they represent. And I just thought that that was so fitting because obviously clovers signify luck in a lot of ways. That episode was a really big part of the turning point of the show. The word clover is not a copyright infringement because it's just a word of a plant. So, we're not going to hopefully get in trouble for that. And I just thought that referring to this community as the Clovers would be really cutesy. I love it. Maybe we need some Clover merch. But who doesn't want to be a Clover, right? Watching Bring It On as a kid, I wanted to be a Clover, that's for sure. And I'm sure most of us did because they were obviously the better team. So our community is going to be considered the Clovers moving forward. So as I was thinking about our community, the Clovers here at She's So Lucky, Lucky Girls, I was thinking that we kind of needed a state of the union to get on the same page about how we're going to be creating our own luck. And a big part of my mission and what I'm doing here is wanting to redefine what it means to be lucky. Because I think a lot of times the term lucky, especially when we're talking about women and we're talking about women who are achieving great things, can be really condescending. People throw out the word lucky when they're talking about successful women or when a woman reaches a milestone as if she only achieved that because of something outside of her, because somebody gave her something, because somebody paid for her to do something, because she slept her way to the top or whatever it is. People are always trying to discredit women and our achievements when, first of all, a lot of those things are still work. I don't know about you. Sleeping my way to the top sounds like some of the hardest work I could do. So I would never knock somebody who's doing that because they're doing some hard work that I know I don't want to do, first of all. Second of all, I think the ability to take things that are given to you and be able to flip that into a bag and flip that into opportunities is an amazing example of creating your own luck because a lot of people are given things but absolutely fumble them. And so this whole idea of creating our own luck is really all about the actions that we take to use what we've been given to make something new. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know if I've felt like 2025 so far, at least when I'm recording this. It's currently spring going into early summer 2025. You wouldn't be able to tell by my outfit because New York hasn't gotten the memo and it's been freezing here, but it is indeed spring going into summer. I don't know if I feel like to date 2025 has been my luckiest year. I think I've gotten to do some really cool things, but the feeling, the vibes haven't been giving lucky. The vibes have been giving we're all collectively fighting for our lives. And I would like for the second half of the year for us all to tap more into our lucky girl energy, whatever that means for us. So I'm wanting to incorporate more conversations on the show about what everyday luck look like for us, because it's really amazing to hear from these successful women who are starring in movies and who are launching companies and who have products in Sephora and all of these amazing things that we've been talking about on the show over the past few months, and who are New York Times bestselling authors. We will continue having those conversations. And for those of us, myself included, who are not there yet, I think it also helps to have lucky conversations about ways that we can start adding a little bit more of that energy into our daily lives that feels a little bit more accessible. So that's what I'm excited to talk about today. Some of the ways that we can all channel lucky energy into our everyday lives. I want to share some of my lucky moments. I also was able to survey several of you to get some of your lucky moments from the community that I'm going to share. So we're going to make the second half of 2025, moving forward, a lot luckier than the first half. Okay. So everything that happened the first half of the year where we all felt like we were hanging on by a thread and fighting for our lives, we're leaving that there. We're leaving that in H1 and moving into H2. We're lucky girls. We're lucky girls moving forward. We're lucky clovers, okay? Clover energy starts now. When I look back on some of my luckiest moments, and I think some of my luckiest moments have been around my relocation, have been around being able to do this podcast full time. None of those things came by happenstance. Oftentimes, there were opportunities that I was able to quickly seize, but underneath the surface, there were so many actions that aligned in order to be able to seize those opportunities. And so as I'm looking to call in more lucky moments in my life, because we've had, the first half of the year has been a little rocky, I'm thinking about what are the daily actions that I'm taking in order to be able to pick up the ball and run with it for that next opportunity that I'm looking for that next lucky moment that I want to have. And so when I think about those things, I think about what I am calling the lucky girl commandments, okay? We're all familiar with the 10 commandments. These are lucky girl commandments that we are all going to abide by to channel our luckiest energy. So lucky girl commandment number 1, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. That is foundational to having any sort of lucky girl energy, because there is nothing worse than being handed an opportunity and fumbling it. And I know I've definitely had opportunities that I did not leverage to their fullest potential that weren't necessarily a fumble, but that didn't move things as far along as they could have. And staying ready so we don't have to get ready is paramount. If you think about playing a sport, and now listen, I'm not a sporty girl, so I can't even name a sport right now off the top of my head. But if you think about playing a sport and being passed a ball to make a game-winning point, in order to make that game-winning point, you have to be ready to catch the ball, you have to be ready to make the play, you have to be ready to make the shot. So if someone were to pass you the ball right now for whatever that game-winning point is that you want to make, are you ready to catch it, and are you ready to execute on that play? If not, that's okay. No shame. But in order to channel that lucky girl energy of staying ready so you don't have to get ready, then you need to get in position to be ready to catch the ball, to make the play, to make the shot, whatever that looks like for you. So does that mean that there's a skill that you need to get? Does that mean that there is someone in your network that you need to connect with? Does that mean that there's someone who you need to seek out for help? What is it that you need to do to get into position to be ready so that when that opportunity inevitably comes your way, you are ready to execute on it? So that is commandment number 1. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Commandment number 2 is to increase your risk tolerance. A lot of being lucky comes from being able to take risks. And this can be really challenging. If you, like me, are a risk-averse person, it can be so scary, even the smallest risk. But learning how to increase our tolerance for risk, learning how to increase our tolerance for discomfort is going to be paramount, because oftentimes those lucky moments are going to be things that push us outside of our comfort zones. They're going to be things that cause us to have to step up just a little bit more than we're used to have to doing, or things that we may not know the full outcome of, but we have to take that first kind of step of faith before we take a leap of faith. All of that involves having a solid risk tolerance. So being able to seize upon those lucky moments means that you need to be able to step up to the plate if the plate feels a little bit higher than what you're used to. It means that you got to be able to take a gamble, to roll the dice, even if you don't know what that end result is going to be. And so for me, what that's looked like in increasing my risk tolerance has just been doing a lot of nervous system work. Like my nervous system has been all over the place lately. And so learning how to regulate it and to find safety, even if I'm in a scenario that may not be within my comfort zone or feel as safe as I would like it to be, has been really, really helpful for increasing that risk tolerance, because lucky girls aren't afraid to take a little risk. It's all about taking calculated risks and being smart about knowing that even if it doesn't work out the way you think it's going to, you're going to find a way to land on your feet. That is the epitome of that lucky girl energy. So the next lucky girl commandment number 3, would be to follow your curiosity and to be in alignment with your intuition. And I think that these two things are very closely connected with one another, because I've often found that my intuition speaks to me through curiosity. Anytime that I'm curious about something, whether it's a new venture, whether it's a person, whether it's a place, it's often because my intuition is pulling me towards that thing. And it's not saying you have to do this, but it's saying, hey, look over here. There's something that may interest you. And being able to lean into curiosity gives us a sense of wonder, and it gives us a sense of openness without necessarily being so dead set on having to have a specific result. And it also gives us a little bit of flexibility to be open to receiving things, even if we don't necessarily know what package that's going to come in yet. Sometimes I think we can really block our luck by being so dead set on things having to come in a certain package, or things having to look or feel a certain way. And luck doesn't always work that way. Sometimes luck can come in really unexpected ways. Sometimes you can get exactly what you're looking for, but in a slightly different package. And so having a sense of curiosity, I think, really disarms us from being too guarded to receive those lucky things. Lucky girl commandment number 4 is going to be detaching from the outcome. Detaching from the outcome. Sometimes we can get so dead set on what it is that we want to receive that we think that if it is not this exact thing at this exact time, then we're not receiving it. We often get so caught up in the how that we can miss the what. And what's really beautiful about having lucky energy and calling in those lucky moments is having a little bit of room for serendipity. It's having a little bit of room for things to turn out better than you could have imagined. And so when we're able to detach from the outcome a little bit, and we're able to detach from having to know exactly how, exactly when, exactly why, that leaves a lot of room for wonder. And that leaves a lot of room for things to be even better than we could have imagined. One of the examples of my own life where I got really lucky was about 6 years ago when I wanted to move from Seattle to LA. And in my mind, I had this idea of how this move was going to happen. I thought that I was going to have to move to LA, crash on a friend's couch, have a really intense job hunt, have a really intense apartment search, and that the whole process was going to be really hard. And that's what I was gearing myself up for when I was preparing to move. The reality of what that move looked like was so much easier. I ended up, a month before I was planning to move, getting a fully remote job that I was able to start when I still lived in Seattle, and transitioned when I moved to California. And it was actually super easy to be able to do so, because I didn't have to get permission. I didn't have to transfer anywhere. I didn't have to go through some really hard interviewing and intense job hunting in a new city where I didn't have a network and where I didn't know many people. It was actually very seamless. The same way I also thought that I was going to have a really hard, intense apartment hunt and everything was going to be so expensive and I didn't know how I was going to be able to afford it. I ended up actually reconnecting with a friend from college who had a rent-controlled apartment in a great neighborhood, and she was looking for a roommate, and there was a room ready and available for me. So instead of having this really hard process where I had to look for a job and I had to look for an apartment and I had to do all these hard things in a new city, I had a job that was easy to take with me, and I had an apartment that was perfect for me within my price range that was just waiting for me. And that was probably one of my luckiest moments ever. Now, the preparation behind that was, I was already preparing to move. I had already not re signed the lease of the place that I was in. I'd spent about 6 months before the move decluttering and getting rid of things and preparing so that by the time it was time for me to move, I had whittled my belongings down to what could fit in my car so I could literally hop in the car and drive to California and be ready to go. But it was truly this idea of the outcome and the how actually being so much easier and so much better than I thought it would have been. That was such a lucky moment. So sometimes we can get so married to thinking that things have to be hard to be worthwhile that when we learn how to detach from the outcome, they can actually be a lot smoother and a lot easier and feel a lot better than we think that they're going to feel. And then our Lucky Girl commandment number 5 is to be present and to be present in the rooms that you are in. And this is something that is really hard for me. And I think is really hard for a lot of us who identify as being ambitious women, is we are always looking forward to that next thing that we want to be doing. We're always looking forward to that next room that we want to be in or that next goal that we want to reach. That sometimes we have a hard time seeing the forest for the trees. We have a hard time seeing what is right in front of us. And I think that a big part of being lucky is also being present, being grounded, having your feet firmly planted in the room in front of you. So, of the rooms you are currently in, even if you don't yet have access to your dream rooms, how present are you in the spaces that you already frequent? How present are you in the community that you already have? How good of a job are you doing at the job that you already have before you move on to your dream job? It's really that idea that how you do one thing is how you do everything. And when you allow yourself to be firmly rooted and planted and present in where you are, it's going to actually be a lot easier to invite in the next thing. But when we're constantly moving the goalposts, we're constantly looking ahead at what we don't have yet and where we want to be next, we can miss a lot of really good opportunities and a really good chances to call in beautiful, lucky things right in front of us because we're always looking for the next thing. Okay. So, those are going to be our Lucky Girl commandments that we are going to follow to make the second half of 2025 and any other time that you may be listening or watching this afterwards our luckiest time yet. I also thought it could be fun to talk more about some everyday lucky moments. And I'm also doing this to remind myself to come from a place of gratitude because candidly, I've just been in such a funky season. I know I released a solo episode a few months ago, a few weeks ago. It feels like months at this point. It was only a few weeks ago. Just talking about kind of the beginning of the year, the rebranding process and everything that's been going on with me. And I do think that with that, I have just been struggling a lot with my mental health. And I've had a hard time really getting back on track. And so a lot of this episode is also advice that I'm trying to give myself and trying to remember gratitude for those times that I have felt a lot better and that I have felt a lot luckier. So I'm going to be sharing a few of my own little lucky girl moments and my own lucky stories to hopefully inspire you, but to also inspire me and to remind myself of times where I have felt luckier and to be more grateful for that energy. So I just shared with that last example about my experience moving to LA and how lucky and seamless that was. I have a very similar experience when I was moving to New York. So if you are newer to listening to the podcast or you're newer to following me, I spent about 4 years living in LA, and in 2023, I was just really getting the itch to leave. And I thought that that itch to leave was going to be temporary. I was just feeling like I was in my early 30s. My 30s were beginning to move really quickly. I was reflecting on my 20s. I was reflecting on all of the things that I wanted to do in my 20s that I didn't get to. I was feeling incredibly stagnant. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm just going to take some time. I'm going to take a little few months. And I was 33 at the time. I'm going to take a few months to have a little eat, pray, love era to get to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do in my 20s that I never got to do or never allowed myself to do just for this couple months. And then at the end of the year, I'm going to go back to LA and I'm going to settle back into my life there. So in the spring of 2023, that is really what I set out to do. And so I ended up getting rid of basically all my stuff, taking the few belongings I still had, putting them in storage, leaving my apartment in LA, and I just traveled for a while. I went to Europe and I spent about a month there just solo traveling through Europe and spending time in Paris and the south of France and London and just traveling around and having my solo travel experience there, which was great. Now, I will say my hot take, I have a lot of hot takes. My hot take is I don't think that solo travel is always the life altering experience that people make it out to be. I think it can be if you are somebody who is not used to doing your own thing. If you're not somebody who is particularly independent, and I don't say that with any sort of shade, but just if you're somebody who usually tends to depend a lot on other people or is more codependent and spends a lot of time with other people, and you are not in touch with yourself and you don't really get to make decisions purely based on what you want to do, solo travel, I'm sure, is absolutely a life-changing experience because you get to focus on yourself in new ways. If you are somebody who already is pretty independent, you're used to doing things alone, you're not afraid of doing things alone, you're used to kind of marching to the beat of your own drum, which I would consider myself more of the latter, not necessarily by choice, often by necessity. If you're just already used to being alone most of the time, solo travel is going to feel like the same stuff you already do, just in a different location. If you're already used to doing your own thing, you're just going to be doing your own thing somewhere else. So while I did enjoy my time solo traveling in Europe, because I got to see things that I wanted to see and visit new cities and visit new places and all of that, I wouldn't say that it was some life-altering experience because I spent I spent all my time in LA alone, and then I go hang out in Paris alone. And yeah, I mean, being in Paris can be pretty sweet, but I wouldn't say that I learned anything, new or incredible about myself. I just got to see some cool places where I was still kind of doing my own thing. So if you are also looking to solo travel, but you're already used to being pretty independent and you think it's going to be a mind-altering experience, don't be disappointed if it's not. That's my tangent about solo travel. So anyways, I spent this time solo traveling. I ended up coming back to the States and just traveling a little bit more, going back to Seattle and spending some time with my family. I went to Hawaii for a bit. I ended up going to Denver for a bit. I went to Vegas for a bit. And then I ended up coming to New York, subletting my friend's place because I thought, oh, it would be really cute to spend a fall in New York. And I felt like, having some time living in New York is something that a lot of people do in their 20s. I didn't really get to do that. I didn't foresee myself living here, but I thought I'll just spend a couple weeks here, maybe a month, whatever. And I had no real plan of how I was going to do that. And then a friend of mine posted on Instagram that she was looking for somebody to sublet her apartment. And I immediately DM'd her like, girl, those are exactly the dates that I'm planning to be there. I'll stay in your place. Obviously, I won't do anything crazy. I'll take good care of it. And it ended up just working out perfectly. So when I got here, I felt like I just fell into this groove immediately that I didn't necessarily anticipate. I was beginning to build community. I was making friends. I was recording the podcast and I was doing it in person and I was interviewing new people and I was networking. And there was just this different energy where I thought, oh, maybe there's something to me being here. And even though I had intended to move back to LA at the end of that, I realized I kind of didn't want to move back to LA. I kind of wanted to stay. But I also had this idea in my head that moving across the country like that was super hard and finding an apartment in New York is impossible and everything is so expensive and all of these reasons why it's so hard. And that's very true. It is very expensive. There are definitely a lot of challenges, but not everything has to be that hard all the time. And so when I made the decision that I wanted to stay, I said a prayer. I said, God, if I am meant to stay here, just make it easy. Just make it easy. And literally the next day, I saw an apartment listing on Street Easy for the same building that I was subletting that my friend lived in for a unit that became available literally the day that I needed to be out of her place. And I ended up getting that. And it was the most seamless, easiest thing ever. And that was incredibly lucky because, like I said, finding a place to live here, moving across the country, all of those things can be incredibly hard, but it doesn't have to be. And so that was just another example of such a lucky moment that I had. also coinciding around that same time was me joining a podcast network. I am so grateful for the people who have found this podcast over the past year or so. I've also had some people DM me really cute things like, I'm such an OG. I've been following you since 2023. And I'm like, oh, honey, I've been creating content since 2014 and podcasting since 2018. Like 2023 is actually a drop in the bucket. But if that's a long time for you, I appreciate you being here for that, year and a half. But all that to say, also in 2023, I ended up joining a podcast network, which was a really big turning point in my career and in my business. And the way that that came to be also was just so serendipitous. I was listening to some podcasts that were also on the network, and I literally just had a thought of, it would be really cool to work with them. It would be really cool if my show was a part of this. 2 days later, I checked my email and someone from the network literally emailed me saying, hey, we love your show. We'd love to have you be a part of this. And it took a lot more time for it to come together than that, because obviously there's negotiations and there's onboarding and there's all that stuff that I was managing. So it wasn't just at the drop of a hat, but it was one of those moments where it was like, whoa, how did that happen? I literally just thought it. And 2 days later, the opportunity is presenting itself. And thankfully, because I'd had a show that was a well-oiled machine, because I'd been really consistent with it, it was one of those stay ready so you don't have to get ready situations where I had a healthy show that I was able to take somewhere else. But some of those things were just reminders of everyday lucky moments where we may have this idea that something is supposed to be super hard. And of course, there are challenges that come with doing a lot of worthwhile things, but not everything has to be hard. So maybe that'll be kind of our another honorary commandment. But disattaching from the outcome does kind of relate to that. That's what I talked about in that version of the commandments. So I hope that some of those examples of some of my previous lucky girl stories can inspire you to release this idea that everything that you do or that everything worthwhile has to be super hard. And even as I was retelling those stories, it was really helpful for me to remind myself of how far I and all of this has really come over the past couple of years. Because if you could have told me even 2 years ago when I was putting my stuff in storage to go travel, that my life would be what it is now, even though I still have a lot of moments that are really challenging, I don't know if I could have seen it. So I do feel really lucky to have gotten this far. And I'm curious to see what's next. Now, I didn't want to only share my lucky girl stories. I also wanted to share some of your lucky girl stories. So I put a call out on Instagram asking y'all to submit some of your everyday lucky stories. And we got a ton of submissions. I'm only going to be reading a couple today just for the sake of time. But I do think maybe throughout the next few months, I'll continue weaving in some of these stories because people sent in a lot of really great things that I would love to highlight. We got a couple dozen responses, and I just wasn't able to fit that many in one episode. But over the course of the year, as we're all beginning to channel more of our lucky girl energy, I definitely want to bring more of these stories onto the podcast. But I wanted to pick just a few that I particularly loved, and a huge thanks to everybody who submitted their lucky girl stories. So this first one says, my lucky story happened last year. I had to move back to my house after a tough breakup, which was my first lucky story. The fact that I had bought a duplex in 2021 and in 2024, I was able to leave a relationship without worrying about housing. I was not doing well emotionally after my breakup, so I knew I had to leave St. Louis. And the only reason I was there was because my ex is from there and his family is there. My second lucky moment was that my work allowed me to relocate to NYC without any major complications. I was stressing out right before my move because I hadn't found a tenant for my unit, but out of nowhere, I got a text from another tenant that her friend is looking for a place to rent. I FaceTimed the friend, gave her a virtual tour of the apartment, and she signs the lease a few days after that initial call. So I went from stressing out to everything falling into place. And on top of that, this tenant also decided to rent my car. I was in the relationship that ended for 4.5 years, and it took me all of 2024 to really heal from that breakup. But I feel so lucky that so much growth has come from it, and now looking forward for all of the lucky stories of 2025. So huge thanks to the submitter of this story. What I really loved about her stories that she shared were she incorporated a few of our commandments. First one being stay ready so you don't have to get ready. She talked about the fact that she had a duplex that she'd previously owned, and that when her relationship ended, she knew she wasn't going to be without housing because she always had somewhere to go. Now, buying a duplex is an amazing accomplishment. I'm not saying everybody needs to run out and buy a duplex because in this economy, everybody's doing the best they can with what they've got. But to be in a position where you're able to do whatever it is that you can to take care of yourself is so incredibly important, especially as women. Making sure that we can still get our needs met even when a relationship ends is so important. It is the epitome of staying ready so you don't have to get ready. And I also loved that moment of being open to serendipity and being unattached from the outcome, where she was able to find the tenant, she was able to find somebody to take her car. It all came into alignment right when it needed to come into alignment without having to know the exact how. So I really loved those lucky stories. And I'm also hoping that you get more lucky stories for the rest of 2025. Okay, lucky story number 2. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been the music girl. I was the girl who knew all of the good music before it hit the radio, making playlists, putting people on to new artists, burning CDs for my friends. She also says, my party favorite to all my guests at my Sweet 16 were mixed CDs that I made on LimeWire. Okay, that's a labor of love because that's a lot of work. The list goes on. Music has always been my thing. In 2021, I decided to learn how to DJ just for fun, no real plan at all. I just planned on messing around in my living room, blending songs for my own pleasure for my ears only. Then a friend asked me to DJ her day party. At first, I thought absolutely not. The thought of DJing in front of people felt very wild and unnecessary. But something eventually told me to just say yes and to just go for it. So I said yes, practiced like crazy, and ended up killing it. And the rest is history. That one set changed everything. Since then, I've built a whole creative career around music. I've DJed for huge brands like Gucci and Aloe, had international gigs, opened for artists that I used to fangirl over, DJed some of the biggest parties in the world, and started my own event / community called Open Invitation that gives people a space to connect through music. I've invested so much into myself and my DJ career over the past 3 years. I've attended creative conferences, taken marketing courses to learn how to better position myself and build visibility, built my own website, pitched cold to dream clients, and even hired an executive coach to help me scale what I knew could be more than just a side hustle. My luck happened when I truly stepped all the way out of my comfort zone and showed up even when I was scared. Definitely seems like luck or fate that me and this amazing journey have been on in just 3 short years. I'd say it's a sprinkle of luck mixed with being perfectly aligned with my passion at the right place and right time. Okay, there are so many things that I loved about that story. Another hot take, I actually think that women make superior DJs because of our ability to read a room. So anytime that I hear a story about a woman DJ who's killing it, I'm like, of course you're killing it because women make superior DJs. Second of all, this is a prime example of the commandment of following your curiosity. It was something that she had always loved and that she decided to learn how to DJ just for fun, following that sense of curiosity. And it ended up creating so many incredible opportunities for her. And this is just such a fun story and is just beautiful and creative. And I just was smiling from ear to ear the first time that I read it. So a really beautiful example of creating your own luck through following your curiosity. And I think I know who submitted that. I think this was one of our attendees at our DC show in April. If I'm remembering correctly, I know who you are. We had the same executive coach. So I really appreciate you submitting this story. Okay, this last one is short and sweet. Last lucky story is my friend ended up getting way too lit and fell asleep early on their birthday when we were supposed to go out and celebrate. I decided not to waste a good outfit and I had my hair done, so I picked up another friend and we went to another club. I ended up meeting the kindest and most generous man ever, and we've been dating for 2 years. I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I didn't go out that night. And what I really loved about this story is it's super relatable, where we all have moments where it's like, we don't want to waste a good outfit. We spend all that time getting ready. Somebody's going to see it, okay? We're still going to have a time, even if we're being dealt a different hand of cards than we initially had planned, that we can make the most of it. And you can also get really lucky and maybe make a new friend, maybe meet a new lover, or maybe you just go out and you just have a really great time. And it's all about that perspective shift for creating your own luck. So I love that. And let that be a reminder to all of us to never waste a good outfit. So those are the lucky girl stories that I'm going to be sharing today. Like I said, there were like 25 more that were great stories. So I'm going to try and find more ways to incorporate them either on the podcast or on socials in the year moving forward so that we can all feel inspired to have just a little bit more lucky energy in our everyday. So that is what I have for you today for our State of the Union for Lucky Girls, as well as our Lucky Girl Commandments. So Clovers, I hope you understand the assignment. You understand we're channeling this energy for the second half of 2025. We're going to turn this ship around. We're going to be receiving. We're going to be abundant. We're going to be magnetic. And we're going to be super lucky. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you could please make sure that you are subscribed to She's So Lucky wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's on Apple, whether that's on Spotify, whether that's on YouTube, so that you don't miss an episode, I would really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a rating and a review. You can do that on Spotify. You can do that on Apple. We love a 5-star situation. So I hope that this episode inspired you to feel more lucky for the rest of the year. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.